when the relentless customer makes speed the new currency. I'm Tonya Hall for ZDNet and Tech Republic, and joining me is Jessica Parisi. She is the president and CEO of BTS USA. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So what kind of work does BTS USA do?
So maybe the easiest way to think about BTS is we are our client's change partner. But in terms of change, if you focus on the people, process, and technology, we've been passionate and focused on the people side. We're our client's people partner for the last 30 years.
In fact, you've had experience working with some of the leading brands in Silicon Valley, such as Salesforce, Uber, Microsoft, Twitter. So what have you seen as far as company culture and some of the top challenges?
Well, all of their cultures are unique, first of all. That said, given the fact that they are not only responsible for some of the technological advances hitting the world, but they're in close proximity to it, I think they're a great playground, if you will, to really reflect on the top challenges that they're orienting their ways of working and their cultures in order to be more and more competitive around. So if I were to summarize, I think there's four top challenges that have been on their minds probably for the last 7, 8, honestly 9, 10 years, and continue to be more and more acute. And as we work with other industries, I see the other industries now grappling and articulating very similar challenges. So the first one I would characterize as the relentless consumer. We don't have to look further than ourselves, right? We now have the ability to, with 2 buttons, order something on Amazon and it will be delivered maybe same day or next day. I personally won't wait longer than 2 minutes for an Uber. We can apply those same expectations, and with every little new app that continues to delight us, that's the expectation we have for our 401k plan or any other service that we're consuming. And the tech and software companies seem to be extraordinarily aware of this. Some of them because they've had to change their own consumption models. So the traditional software companies who used to sell you a 1-year or a 3-year lock-in contract had to go to as a service, offering new consumptions. And when you break that kind of lock-in business from a client, it makes you much more scrappy. So not only are they aware that our expectations and their customers' expectations are shifting every day, but now they have to earn it. Right? They have to earn the loyalty of the customer every day. And so a lot of their business models and their ways of working are being structured to support that relentless consumer. I would say the second one, I think I first heard this phrase at Salesforce's Dreamforce event either 3 or 4 years ago. And it was this point that the prevailing kind of dominant mantra across all the tech companies right now is speed. And speed seems to be the new currency. So it used to be maybe 10 or 20 years ago, conventional business wisdom that there was a place in the market for the first most innovative company, a place for the second by disrupting it, and then the third for the cheapest. If I were to overgeneralize, the sentiment more recently in the last few years is first mover takes all. So it's a bit of a monopolistic pressure to, as quickly as you can, get the most users, reach that tipping point, and then fight for loyalty. And that's when you get massive scale and massive business benefit. So I think given that that's how they see the world, again, they're orienting themselves around speed and speed over efficiency and, moving as fast as they can to stay competitive. Another thing that's, first time I heard it was actually an executive at VMware back in 2009 articulate they were going through a major pivot like most of the fast growth tech companies are, from single product to multi or from one customer channel to another. And he was saying, basically, our leaders have to understand that the new reality for them is they have to both perform and transform at the same time. It's no longer, this is my product or my business unit, and I'm going to eke out efficiencies and improvements. It's I'm going to do that, and I'm going to launch new services on top of that. And those new services are different business models. They require different customer support. It's hard. But I would say they all have come to that same conclusion. And I see the other industries starting to wake up and realize, even though it feels hard to have ambidextrous leaders, that is the new paradigm with which leaders need to accept and lead. And then I'd say the fourth challenge, they've really been in a war for talent, especially technical and developer talent now for a long time. If I think back to the Lehman crash and afterwards, so it's probably been 17 years now in a war for the best technical talent. And because a lot of them are coming out of school, I'd say they have a heightened maturity and awareness of the evolving values and expectations of their people. And they've come to, many of them have come to understand that the newer employees, they just demand radical candor. They demand authenticity. They're not at all inspired by a buttoned up, more bureaucratic feel. They walk into a room and they notice right away if there's diversity or not. They expect a purpose that's motivational, not just for the world, but for them personally. They're not there for employment for life. They work in tours of duty and they need to be stretched. So I think those are the four. I think the top challenges: the relentless consumer, speed is the new currency, leaders getting their heads around performing and transforming at the same time, and then the evolving values of their people and shifting their culture accordingly.
You talked about the relentless customer and the fact that businesses have to keep up at a speed. In fact, you've articulated speed is currency. So how do companies grow large but retain the original values and culture when they have to grow at such a rapid pace?
That's the art, isn't it? That is the art. I can share a few thoughts. That'll vary. The first, I'm going to talk a little bit about the agile operating model, because I also see that moving fast beyond tech, not just in the IT functions, but in the other functions of financial services and oil and gas industries and retail and so forth. And then I can speak a little bit to the clarity on values and norms to preserve and strengthen a culture as it grows. But I think the first one with Agile is a big deal because of how universal it's now attempting to get applied. And I think some mistakes I see other industries making on Agile is they're misinterpreting it solely as a technical process, something just for developers and for software. And perhaps even the IT leaders who are adopting it are moving too fast to technical process without remembering the core philosophical intent. And if they were to go back and read the original manifesto, which was written in 2001 by 17 software developers and executives in a little mountain town in Utah, the majority of the manifesto is their desire to work the way they want to work. And if you're a team working on cool software products or coding to delight a customer, you want freedom. You want freedom, in their words, from Dilbert-esque processes that feel like process for process sake or bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake, or from managers who ask for updates without adding any value. And that was kind of the intent behind creating an Agile, a way of working. And honestly, if you're trying to have hyper growth and stay competitive, the company with the most powered up, passionate, empowered frontline to understand the customer, to iterate rapidly with the customer, I think is going to win.
So what kind of traits then or characteristics would or should candidates have or obtain to support this kind of culture?
Yeah, there's a few. First of all, you have to believe in experimentation. And not in experimentation for the sake of experimentation, but experimentation against what you're hearing from the customer is valued. And this is very different because a lot of companies work in annual budgeting and capital allocation processes. So there's a big strategic process. It takes weeks and months. They decide to invest millions. They move headcount around, and then they wait a year or longer to see the impact. What Agile is and what leaders have to understand is perhaps there's some decisions that require that much rigor, but the vast majority of daily work should be in constant experimenting and iteration based on customer and market data. So then a leader has to figure out, how do I create the environment to make that happen versus me and my peers telling them what the strategy is and making that happen. That would be the first one. The second thing I would say, it's an overused term, but it's a level of customer obsession, because all of this small incremental work the team needs to be doing it with the intent of improving the customer's experience or whatever the customer problem is that the service is going to solve. That means they need a lot of data. That means they need to be talking to the customer or getting data back that they can actually use to drive improvements. And so that makes the leader's job not the overseer, not the report reader, not the one who checks in, but the one who creates the environment to give them clarity of intent and the data with which they can iterate on and learn from and continue to evolve. A third trait of leaders who are great in this environment, I'm going to talk about a mindset. You have to believe your people are smart and they'll figure it out. It's the multiplier mindset. And you might think this is really obvious, but the opposite mindset is believing that you have experience or tenure or expertise that the team needs to do a good job. And if you have leaders who actually believe in their people and believe that they're smart and they'll figure it out, their natural way of interacting with them is going to keep them engaged and empowered and feel like they've got the trust of their team to, do the right thing for the customer and to iterate. So those are a few. Would you like me to keep going?
Well, I have a question, because you're talking about building a team, right, with certain characteristics and fitting into a company culture. How does artificial intelligence or machine learning and understanding what as a culture you have in artificial intelligence help in screening? And a lot of businesses are using algorithms to determine whether or not they should hire or even interview certain employees. So how does that factor in? How can you get the right talent when you have screening tools that potentially could not detect the passion that your future employee could have about your customers?
Well, first of all, the screening tools should learn to detect for the passion around the customer. So any sort of selection should be for culture fit first, I believe, and it should be for job fit second. You can teach people new skills. You can't always hire people who are going to enrich the culture and be a great culture fit. And going back to Silicon Valley, I've heard from numerous executives who are in rapid growth and they need, for example, an engineer to become a frontline manager in a year as opposed to 4 years or something. The cost of a poor culture fit is enormous. It might take 6 or 9 months. The team is hurt from it and then they got to rebuild. But to your point, if you're going to use a more data-driven approach, which I highly recommend because it really helps to fight against the not like me syndrome in the recruitment process, the criteria, the observable behavior, and the values with which it's testing for is everything. So it means the companies have to take the time to define their culture, the behaviors, the beliefs that manifest itself in the way that they want it, and they have to take the time to define the observable behaviors, or what I call high performance and role, to find those people. So it's the quality of the data, and it's the quality of the questions, the criteria.
By what standard are Silicon Valley values the right ones?
I think some aren't. I think it really depends by company and by leader and leader. We have had many examples of poor values. I'm not sure it's unique to Silicon Valley. Most people want to feel cared for by their manager. They want to feel trusted. They want to know what high performance looks like. They want to know that they're going to be able to do the best work of their lives because there's not bureaucratic crap in their way, and they're free to innovate and be passionate. If you take the opposite of some of that, you typically have values that hopefully people won't tolerate and they will quit. Some of the worst we've heard about in the news more recently is hustling, which is I'm going to get everything I can out of everyone. And that's horrible, but I think that's rare.
So what should traditional business leaders do different to be more like the right Silicon Valley startups?
They have to create operating mechanisms and language and ways that they interact with their team to have a front line that feels empowered and free to do the right thing for their customers and to bring insights to their peers and to their leaders. And those insights need to be put into a system where you can shift your priorities real time throughout the year. Going back to that whole annual cadence, it doesn't work anymore given how rapid the customer expectations are changing and the market's evolving. It doesn't work to set 3 priorities for the year, first, second, third. Most likely they're not going to be first, second, third 12 months from now. Number 2 might drop to number 10, number 10 might drop to number 1, but you have to create the system where that feedback loop is coming rapidly and people care so much that they're the ones making the company smarter and smarter.
So what are some of the best practices that businesses could take on to, that you would recommend that they take on to adopt a better culture and be able to deal with the relentless customer in the future?
I think there's 2 groups of categories. One would be, how do you actually change your people? How do you change how they view their roles, how they see the market, how they see how the company needs to run, how they need to empower their teams and do the work? And then there's shifting some of the daily structures so that cadence really gets embedded. I think you need rigor in both areas. And it can be really small. And I think that's the key. I think some of the mistakes traditional consulting firms make is they go for this heavy hitting 2x4 that might take 5 years, and they're going to try to redesign the whole thing. And it's all these people come into the company and do the work for them, which is very unempowering. I think looking for the lowercase, low hanging fruit. For example, people spend the majority of their time in meetings. They just do. So as a company, you could actually analyze your meetings. How are they run? Is there candor? Is there rigorous debate? Is there shared context? Or do we have meetings where the person leading it has to have perfect slides, no one says anything, and then people leave? Looking at some of those daily cadences and structures and being intentional around shifting them through using your leaders, not through externals, I think is a really good first step.
You know, Jessica, I really appreciate your time. You offer great insight in business leadership and company culture. And if somebody wants to find out more about the type of ideas that you have or more about your work, how can they do that?
So we have a website. It's bts.com, and I'm also on LinkedIn.
Well, there you go. Thanks again for your time. And if you guys want to find more of my interviews, you can do that right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or maybe go to my website, which is tonyahall.net. Thanks for watching.